There once was a god named Sol. Controlling the zone was her goal. She stopped and took aim, then shot out her flame, and all her foes turned into coal. Hey guys, James here again with another video, and today I want to talk about Divine Knockout, or DKO, Hi-Rez Studios' unique take on the platform fighting genre. In DKO, you play as one of a number of divine entities as you fight it out and compete over different objectives. They are the world's only 3D platform fighter, and advertise themselves as such. However, while I do like the concept and theme, I have to say that I'm pretty skeptical of whether this game will actually see any real success in the future, for a couple of reasons. So, without further ado, let's dive into this. Divine Knockout is a fighting game that takes inspiration from MOBAs, namely Smite, and then combines them with mechanics from platform fighters, where you rack up damage and try to send others off of the map. Here, you'll play as gods and divine beings from a variety of different cultures. The number of characters and cultures is pretty small right now, but I'm sure they'll be releasing a lot more as time goes on. They're all drawn in this chibi sort of art style, which by all means looks pretty good, but it's definitely an art style that won't appeal to everyone. It's cute and all, but don't be deceived by Zeus Cosby over there. He might look like a swan, but deep down, he's just a horny bull. Each god has a number of different attacks and abilities that you can use when fighting. In terms of basic attacks, you have a light attack, heavy attack, charge attack, an aerial light, and aerial heavy attacks. You're also able to do a dash move to dodge incoming danger, much like Zeus dodges paternity cases. In addition to these basic attacks, every character will also have 4 spells or abilities at their disposal. 2 of these abilities are more basic, usually doing damage and or applying some sort of debuff or crowd control. The third ability will be a movement ability that can be used to engage in fights, or save yourself from being knocked out. These moves are incredibly important, as having it on cooldown often means you won't be able to recover. I personally think some recoveries are better than others, mainly because a number of these abilities let you choose exactly where you want to land. This essentially makes them get out of jail free cards, but as long as they balance it correctly, it should be fine. All characters are also able to use their aerial moves and dashes to help with recovery, almost like Jigglypuff's Pound, which is cool, but again, the movement ability is massive. Every character also has an ultimate ability which is charged up over time. These moves can be incredibly powerful, but are not always super easy to hit. Overall, I think the gods are well designed thematically and have distinct identities. Something else interesting they include are talents, which let you modify and buff your god. While this can be nice for variance and progression, it can also be a little bit annoying when you're at a disadvantage, however small it might be, simply because you just don't play the game enough. Personally though, I have some mixed feelings around the actual combat, and I think a general theme to keep in mind is that I personally think the game feels far more like a MOBA than it does a platform fighter. First, I will say that I think that actually playing as the gods and using their abilities feels quite smooth, responsive, and pretty polished. The animations are well done, and outside of some ledge interactions, I think the movement feels really solid. The pace of the characters is a bit on the slower, more methodical side. That's not an issue, but just something to point out. I think part of it is just the fact that it's in a 3D space, and this makes the maps feel much larger than a 2D fighter where you can easily close in distance. Not only that, but many moves will have long animations, and as a result, you'll often have moves that clash or get interrupted. Again, this isn't an issue, and other games have this too, but it can be pretty noticeable here. I do wonder if perhaps a block or parry move would have been a good addition to the game, maybe have it only work against physical attacks, I don't know. They do make up for this though by making attacks have considerable impact. You really feel every hit, and sending others flying and ricocheting off parts of the stage with high velocity can be pretty exciting. I did find the auto-aim to be quite strong and a bit annoying though, often forcing you to swing at people who you weren't even looking at. It's helpful in many situations without a doubt, but it's definitely noticeable and can mess you up. Personally though, I think the biggest thing that the combat is really missing is more verticality. For one thing, the natural jumps of characters are quite short, and without the ability to fast fall, the aerial game can kind of lack control. You only have 2 aerial attacks too, which also have to double as many recovery moves. This kind of makes it so that the aerial game lacks any real variety or depth. I feel like having an up or down air move would make this game feel way more satisfying. Honestly, the ground game could use a little more variety too, but I recognize that the 3D space brings its own unique challenges. That's why personally, I describe the game as a MOBA in the sky, where characters have different types of basic attacks. It's a lot about positioning, spacing, and cooldown management, and while familiar, it definitely has a different feel from platform fighters or even traditional fighters where I feel like you have a lot more moves, combos, and creativity at your disposal. Even so, let me be clear, that doesn't mean it's easy. I definitely think the game has a good amount of skill involved, and you can tell when players know what they're doing and have an advantage. While I'm not blown away by the combat personally, I definitely had fun and intense games, and knocking out enemies with boulders and spiking them into the abyss can be pretty satisfying. I just personally don't feel like there's the level of complexity to the fighting mechanics that would really keep me coming back. Another fairly big issue in my opinion is the poor design of the various maps and modes. Let's start with what are deemed the hardcore modes, the 1v1 and 2v2 modes. Overall, they're pretty intense, but the biggest issue will probably be balance. I could be wrong, but I'm not sure if the game was really designed with 1v1 in mind. Obviously, it'll take some time for a meta to really develop, but I feel like some characters just seem way stronger for the 1v1 format than others. Another issue, and this actually applies to all modes, is the fact that you can see the characters your opponents select. So in a one-on-one format, it can be super easy to get counterpicked by someone who actually knows what they're doing. I don't play a lot of fighting games online, but this isn't typical, right? Oh, also, instead of doing stocks or a number of KOs, you actually go by rounds. The first to knock out the other wins the round, and all damage is then reset for the next round. This isn't an issue, but I guess it's just a little bit different, and I have some mixed feelings. It's kinda weird. On the one hand, this gives players an even playing field with every stock, like a traditional fighting game, but I do feel like it gives a different feel and different momentum to the game than, say, classic platform fighters like Smash. In 2v2, this means that if you or your teammate are knocked out early, the other guy is then forced to fight 1-on-2 while the other just watches. 3v3 arcade mode seems to really be the bread and butter of the game, and is what I spent most of my time playing. This arcade mode has a couple of different offerings. First we have knockout mode, which is your basic team deathmatch style game. First team to 8 knockouts wins, and this is probably the most enjoyable mode with straight up fighting all around. Then we have King of the Hill mode, where teams fight over control of a changing zone. Overall it's enjoyable and works very well with the MOBA style gameplay and abilities, but I think there's some issues that make it a little bit problematic. To start, for whatever reason, the first zone will sometimes spawn closer to one team than the other. Like, really? And then next, the mode can actually feel a little bit snowbally, especially if you lose the first team fight. You only get points if your team has more players in the zone, and you can't really contest the zone. Because of this, I found that losing that first team fight can really put you into a death spiral of sorts, where you're now at a disadvantage and may be forced to take a bad fight to try and stall or get yourself on the board. Then, after all your hard work, you finally knock out your opponents and capture the zone, only to find out that, hey, a new zone is appearing and, oh look, there's your opponents who have respawned with 0 damage on them, allowing them to easily win the new zone. Not every match will be like that, but it's definitely something that I notice can happen. Then we have Coin Blitz, which is similar to King of the Hill. Players will Scrooge McDuck it up as you scramble to collect coins and deposit them into the chest. Hitting and knocking out your opponents lets you take their coins. It's an okay mode, not as good as King of the Hill in my opinion, but not bad. Only thing is there can be some chest camping, which is kinda natural. Finally, we have what is probably the worst mode, and that's Oddball. Here, teams fight over control of the crown. A player can hold on to it, but if they're hit, they'll then drop the crown. Teams will try to hold on to the crown for as long as possible in order to accumulate points. The first time I played Oddball, I actually enjoyed it and was thoroughly amused, but after that, it became pretty clear what the issues with the mode are. Oddball doesn't incentivize fighting and instead rewards you for just running around, dodging wrenches, and dodging balls. It pretty much defeats the whole point of the game, and add in the fact that some characters can fly and stall out the game, and it just makes this mode awful. In fact, after a while, I pretty much stopped seeing it ever voted on. I'm not really a big fan of the maps either. Some are enjoyable, but I feel like the stage hazards are just far too strong. Every map has some sort of hazard, from collapsing floors to spinning parts, and while I like how it requires extra awareness and can force interesting fights, sometimes it can just kind of feel like I'm dying to the map more than the actual players. Like seriously, who designed this thing and thought to themselves, oh man, the players are gonna love this? I personally think with how hard characters bounce off features of the stage that hazards would be fine just doing a bit of hit stun. But again, I do recognize that they can make things very interesting. Perhaps the biggest issue with all of this is the fact that you can't even choose which modes you want to queue for. The first round is randomly selected, and each round after you get to vote on one of 2 random offerings. I don't think it's a bad system, but oftentimes you have to make a choice between a map you don't like and a mode you don't like. Which actually brings me to a question. What matters to you more? Are you a map or a mode guy? Again though, while I have been quite critical of the game and some of the choices Hi-Rez has made, I have to admit that I did have some fun while playing the game. There can be some really intense moments, especially with friends, and to me, the feeling you get while playing it is very reminiscent of how the end of a close Overwatch game might feel, with players desperately scrambling to contest the point and yelling to get the last guy. This makes matchmaking really important because, honestly, not a lot of my games had that sort of feeling. Some did, for sure, but I feel like a pretty large chunk of games are stomps in either direction, and if players leave mid-match, they add in these really strong bots that take over which can completely screw over the other team as well, just making it a not really fun experience for either side. Not only that, but the monetization scheme is just awful. They're copying the whole multiverses model, which I really hate. You get 4 basic gods for free, which isn't bad, but once you consider the base mode is 3v3, you realize it's actually not that good. You unlock other gods by leveling up your characters and earning tokens. Each subsequent god you earn is more expensive though, so if you want to play free to play, it will become quite a grind even after only the first god you unlock. Then add in the fact that for whatever reason they had a limited window to claim the game for free. It's just a weird choice, especially since the player base doesn't seem that big to begin with. If you miss claiming it on Epic or Steam, you might be forced to wait until the game is eventually free again, or if you really want to play it, you're gonna have to be willing to shell out for one of these other editions. The basic $10 pack gives you 4 base gods plus 1200 in currency, essentially about 2 additional gods, or I assume enough to get the battle pass when it eventually comes out. The $25 Founders Edition gives you 4 additional gods on top of the default 4 you unlock, as well as an extra skin. I'm not even sure if this is that much better value, to be honest, as it's effectively an extra $15 for just 2 extra gods. I guess it depends on how much you value skins and other goodies, but yeah, I don't know. Then with the $50 Ultimate Edition, you get the same 8 gods plus 4 tokens to unlock future gods, 2 skins, 1000 in currency, which is about 2 gods, and some other stuff. While this seems better than the Founders Edition, it's still effectively an extra $25 for what amounts to, I guess, 6 extra gods. Again, it really depends on how much you value the extras. In my personal opinion, you should wait for the game to go free to play, but with Hi-Rez's track record, we'll see if the game is even around by then. But hey, I hope they can prove me wrong. Overall, as you can tell, I'm quite skeptical of DKO, and I'm personally going to give it a 2.5 out of 4, for now. While I think the concept and theme are great, and the combat is actually decent, I think there are some clear issues that hold the game back from being truly good in its current iteration. It's still early, but I also wouldn't expect drastic changes to the core mechanics, at least not anytime soon. It can definitely be a fun little brawler, in particular with friends, but the problem is, I just don't see enough in this game that I think it would pull you away from the MOBA or platform fighter you were already playing before. To me, DKO feels like a game you might try for a couple of hours for a change of pace, but then at the same time, maybe it doesn't actually need to be much more than that. I can at least respect that it goes into new territory, and who knows, maybe this is the first iteration of more similar, and hopefully, better games to come. But hey, that's just me. Let me know down below what you think. Have you tried DKO and what'd you think of it? And as usual, if you made it this far, I truly appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed the video and consider clicking some of those buttons to help a brother out. And as usual, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Peace.